All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. This is an experiment for Brian and I. We're both in the same room, which you would think, oh, we're going to do a podcast and it's in the same room, so it's going to be so much easier. But actually, I think it's harder. I think it's definitely harder because now we have to figure out how to pass this microphone back and forth. Anyways, hey, Brian.
Hey, Len. Hi, everyone. I'm speechless. It's very strange to be doing this. So yeah, we're going to be passing a physical mic back and forth, and we'll see if this makes for entertaining YouTube television. Hopefully, it'll make for a good recorded episode. You would think being in the same room would simplify things, but we've done this before. It's been a long time since we've been in the same room,
I feel like
and
we should have left the mic here and just like
it's
talked
not.
into
It's
it.
not. Well, you didn't like that. You wanted to like slide it back and
Although
forth.
at first I was happy to have it just here. You kept on kind of bringing up different concerns. Now I'm sort of having regrets about this.
Put it back in.
All right, so you entertain people for a moment while I do that.
Okay, I'll entertain. Well, when there's zero people here, it's hard to entertain the
But they
people
might be
who
watching
will.
after the fact.
Who will in the future stumble upon this after the fact. Okay, how about I'll share? We just were asked a question on our Discord server, in our Keeper in Dynasty channel. Quinn asked whether we like Nico Dawes or Joel Hofer. It's Hofer, right?
Probably.
For Dynasty. And
Oh, actually, I need the mic.
and then Quinn followed up. Okay, I can talk into it. Just keep pointing at me. Quinn followed up by saying like they think Dawes is the better goalie, but could be stuck behind Blackwood and Vanacek if they both play well. And my response, do you think I can still be heard?
Yeah.
My response was that I don't like. I think imagining that Blackwood and Vanacek both play well is like kind of a leap. I think they're both like made to be inconsistent. So and like Blackwood, Elon showed me like a quote where Tom Fitzgerald, the GM for New Jersey, was like, "Yeah, we're ready to start the season with Vanacek and Blackwood. Like that's a tandem. We're good with that." I'm like, I think it might be just blowing a little hot air. Like that's what a GM would say to try not devalue their piece. But I think even in like the Shayna Goldman Beats episode, it doesn't sound like the organization is very pleased with Mackenzie Blackwood, his play, his attitude, his vaccination choices. So, like it's and I was listening to your interview with Prashanth recently too. It's like these guys who made this choice to not get vaccinated, to be like the three guys in the league who didn't. I think it's gonna follow them forever. They're not gonna be ever considered like team players. So what? Do you have
This is
something to
not
say?
working. I just don't think I could do this.
Oh no. Do you want to stop the stream?
No, you just hold it.
Okay.
Now I dropped this and I just want to not lose it. Now I regret taking the microphone.
It's over there. Anyway, back to Dawes or Vanacek. Or sorry, Dawes or Hofer. So I actually need to go look this up because Hofer was on the Springfield Thunderbirds team that I think won the Calder Cup in the AHL this year. He played 10 playoff games and had a 934 save percentage. And I'm just trying to see who their other playoff goalie was. Charlie Lindgren played 8 playoff games and a 914 save percentage. So they sort of shared the net, but Hofer was the one who had an edge in both games played and save percentage. So like there's promise there. There's definitely like promise for a future with Joel Hofer. But I really liked what I saw from Nico Dawes last year, and so did Shayna Goldman. And I think it was a matter of like a workload. Like we saw it coming. Like Nico Dawes can play well a couple games at a time, and then like he just didn't have the ability to withstand a heavy workload. So I think he's a legit tandem. Like I think a Vanacek Dawes tandem would be fine. And that's why in a dynasty league, like immediately I like Dawes. I think long term it's hard to know. Like Hoffer's with St. Louis. St. Louis has Binnington for another 5 years. Is it under contract 4 or 5 years to like the end of 2027? Not that that means Binnington can't be usurped because he was this year, but yeah, I'm not that up to like. I think Binnington, like he's where the investment is in St. Louis. We saw them try so hard to make it work this year. It did. So if you're looking for opportunity, I think there's bigger opportunity in New Jersey than St. Louis.
I think it's interesting just because it's like, on one hand, I get what you're saying that Hoffer is behind Binnington, but at the same time, in like New Jersey, Dawes is behind two goalies, right? Like,
Well, yeah, but I think it'll be one before. I think it'll be one before long.
yeah, but that's just guessing, right? So maybe the right question is to try to hold off on the decision right now and see, because I think it's possible that Blackwood maybe could bounce back, and maybe it could be Blackwood and Vanacek for a while, and Dawes is in the minors, while Hoffer is just one injury or slump of Binnington away from potentially getting a lot of games, and at least he'll get some games next year, assuming St. Louis doesn't bring someone else in. But it's tough to predict.
Dawes is also, I'm just checking out if he's on a two-way. I don't think he's on a two-way contract. So like that's reason for the Devils to keep him in the NHL.
But he didn't start the year.
If he starts the year in the NHL.
I don't know about that. Okay, I guess we'll. Anyway, let's start the actual show, because who knows? This is not what we prepared for. So this was just Brian killing time while I tried to mess with the microphone. But I think we're good to like start the actual show. But oh, you know what? Okay. Let me actually start the recording.
Hi, Sir Fonty.
Hi, everybody. Okay.
You can start it over.
Well, I never started it.
Oh.
Okay, so this is hard to now type with.
Do you want here? Let me.
Yeah, hold that.
We're gonna work on this. Hey everyone who's joining us live or belatedly.
Okay.
One of the best names, like Elon has the draft results up on the screen right now. One of the top names in the first round, Rutger McGroarty. Sounds made up. Rutger McGroarty.
Like the thing is, like the people who are, big prospect people are probably like, how are you making fun of this name only now? He's been on our radars forever. But it's funny, Winnipeg took this guy, Rutger McGroarty, who is like not someone that I was super familiar with right before, like just like a couple weeks before draft time when I was listening to podcasts. But then they also got, with the 30th pick, Brad Lambert, who I'm going to be doing a show soon with like Scouching, Will Scouch, all about the draft. And we'll get obviously more into this with someone who actually knows what they're talking about. But like, Brian, did you know Brad Lambert going into this season was considered like a top 3 pick, then just had this like terrible season, tumbled down the rankings, and it was like really controversial going into the draft. Like some people were having him like in the 10s or like the 20s. He ends up falling all the way to 30, and now he's like this like really strange guy, because on one hand apparently he's like the best skater, like he's like McDavid like skater, but just like I guess his compete level, there's quite like Cam Robinson was all, oh, I don't think that he's like tries hard enough. It's like did you see that movie Hustle on Netflix with Adam Sandler?
No.
It's like, anyways, he was like a scout for the NBA, and there was like a guy who was like the team that he was, I think it was Philadelphia, and like who like they really wanted to pick this player, and Adam Sandler was like, oh, he's not like trying hard enough or something like that. And then it turned out that he wasn't good because he didn't like put in the effort, and I guess that was like a knock on Brad Lambert, and he got like played for 2 teams. But anyway, I think he's going to be someone really interesting to follow to see if he's a bust or if he's like the best value pick ever, as someone who like was a top 3 like going into the season.
Do you know that Brad Lambert is the nephew of New York Islanders general manager or coach? What's his name? Lane Lambert? Isn't that the new coach? I think. I need to like. Now I'm doubting myself because you didn't give me the. Yeah, there you go. And like it's always like interesting to me when you see like, and Brad Lambert is Finnish, but I assume that's because his father happened to be playing in Finland when he was born.
All right, let's start. Let's get the show on the road. All right, let's do this. So thanks everyone for joining live last minute.
That's not interesting, Brian.
It is, but also we have like people waiting on us that are probably like already hoping that we'll be done soon.
Oh, yeah.
So we should probably start. So we need to start if we want to be done. We're gonna bail now?
No.
Let's go.
It's got to be quick though. 30 minutes.
Yeah, if you let me start, it'll be fast. Okay. Yeah, yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who are in the same room for the first time since I don't know how long, for an impromptu episode. We're going to see how long we could go before our partners tell us that we need to get out of here. I'm your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and I just had to take the opportunity to grab my friend Brian up to the studio to talk about all the craziness of the past couple of days. We're not going to talk about the draft, okay? I got a show coming out with the draft really soon with Will Scouch. But in the meantime, there was a lot of trades, including from this guy's favorite team. I already said his name. I blew it, but everyone knows who's with me. It's the fantasy hockey robot, the poop out prognostication, the IPP MVP, Brian Come.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everybody. Yeah, here we are coming from the studio / my bedroom from last night and tonight. It's really rare that Elon and I get to do this in the same room, which is actually probably a good thing. We're going to try and do this without you noticing that it's easier for us to do this from separate cities or even continents and separate microphones, but we're going to do our best. Like Elon said, we had to. So much has happened, and I actually won't have a chance to sit down and podcast for like another week. We don't want to leave you hanging on all our thoughts with all that's transpired since the draft. So, Elon, let's get this started.
All right, well, Keeping Karlsson, probably presented by DobberHockey.com. I'm going to throw that out there. They've been keeping track of everything going on and writing really good articles, so check it out. But yeah, let's just go through as many of the trades that we can and give our takes, our initial takes. We haven't done super deep dives yet, but let's start in Ottawa. Brian, when's the last time the Ottawa Senators acquired a star player? I know they're really good at getting rid of star players. They develop star players, and then they give them away for almost nothing. Well, actually, the Erik Karlsson has turned out to be like a huge haul. That's a whole other discussion.
I can tell you when. The last time was when the Sens acquired Matt Duchene at exactly the wrong time of their trajectory, and that led to the Avs getting Bowen Byram, who was a key part of the Cup run they're on. But at that time, the Sens did not know what pick they were trading away. They weren't supposed to be a lottery team. They were, but now they knew they were giving up the 7th round pick, or the 7th overall pick. That became Kevin Korchinski for the Chicago Blackhawks. So at least we can make like an immediate comparison that we know what DeBrincat was worth. And I still, I'm daring to dream as an Ottawa Senator fan / person living in Ottawa. Like it feels dangerous to have any kind of hope or optimism. It's an uncomfortable and unfamiliar feeling, but it's really creeping in here.
Yeah, Alex DeBrincat is the person that the Sens acquired. I didn't, we're working on how to like build this show like off the cuff like this. But yeah, he was a huge acquisition. Chicago, I don't know if you're a Chicago fan, like what could you be thinking right now? Like, I don't understand. They're doing a rebuild. So they got rid of DeBrincat, like someone I'd imagine you could build around. Kirby Dach, who has been a bit of a disappointment. Now he's on the Habs. And I guess we'll talk about him in a little bit. I guess he's like the new Kotkaniemi potentially. But anyways, let's focus on the Sens and DeBrincat first, and then we'll jump around the league. But so Alex DeBrincat, so the Sens gave a 7th, 39th pick in this past draft. Like Brian said, Korchinski was the 7, also a pick in 2024. And they acquire a guy who, of course, you remember 2 seasons ago, this amazing breakout, 32 goals and 24 assists for 56 points in 52 games, over point per game, pacing for like over 40 goals. So it's like pretty hard to acquire a 40 goal scorer. And this is adding to a team that already has, right? Like Batherson, Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, Tim Stützle. So all of a sudden, this top 6 has 5 pieces that are all people that people are probably going to want to draft pretty high in fantasy. Very exciting. Of course, that might mean one of them now doesn't get on the top power play. So maybe someone gets hit a little bit, but it'll be fun to see what the Sens do. I know they're bringing in Jake Sanderson on D. Maybe they could run 2 even power plays. I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, but let's just focus on DeBrincat to start. Does this raise his fantasy value? Like on one hand, he's on this like younger team that seems a lot more deep. On the other hand, he was playing with Patrick Kane, and Patrick Kane is like probably better than all these players, at least for one more season, maybe 2. I don't know how much longer Patrick Kane can keep being a star, but the Sens don't have someone that's been like a perennial point per game or higher 90, 100-point player. So Brian, overall, do you think this like raises DeBrincat's stock? Does it lower it, or does he stay kind of the same? This past season, he had 78 points in 82 games, 41 goals. So, is that what you're expecting again for next year? 40 goals, 80 points?
I hope so. Like personally, of course. I think there's no doubt to me that Alex DeBrincat is a legit 40-goal player. I think the big question in my mind is whether he's going to be able to see enough ice time to get those 40 goals. Like the last 2 years in Chicago, he's played 20 and a half minutes, almost 21 minutes a night. And, you look to Ottawa, who their most deployed players are. For example, Brady Tkachuk played just under 19 minutes a night. So those extra few shifts a night might be enough to, potentially knock a few goals off of DeBrincat's totals. But I think that's the really only downside. I mean, you mentioned he's not playing with Patrick Kane. That could hurt too. But I think like you mentioned the return for the Erik Karlsson trade and Josh Norris. Like there's a really great centerman who's evolving in Ottawa, and you've got Stützle coming up too, also playing the position. So I think DeBrincat could probably work with those guys just fine. And remember, DeBrincat came out like at the start of his career really strong. 28 goals as a rookie, 41 goals as a sophomore, and then just 18 goals in 70 games in his 3rd season in the league. And while everybody was concerned, our take on the show was like, this has been a disastrously unfortunate season for Alex DeBrincat. Like his expected goals totals were still really solid and up there, but his shooting percentage was like cut in half compared to his career numbers. And sure enough, that shooting percentage has bounced back in the 2 years since. And this is a guy who's a really high percentage shooter. He's shot over 15% in 4 of his 5 NHL seasons, except that really snake bitten one. And he also takes over 3 shots per game the last few seasons. So these are all reasons to believe that Alex DeBrincat is going to be all that he has been before. This guy's for real. And it was strange. I figure at his age, if Chicago's done rebuilding, he'd probably still be around. Like he could be there at the start and the end of the rebuild and be a really important piece that's hard to reacquire at that point. So definitely interesting from the Chicago's perspective and what they're doing, but I really like the pull for the Sens. I think the fantasy impact overall might be that maybe from Ottawa we see, like, I think this helps Tim Stützle because he was sort of on the outside looking in of the Norris, Batherson, Tkachuk line, right? So it was Stützle and, well, Connor Brown and like Alex Formenton or whoever was up there. Now DeBrincat's there. That's a legit threatening second line. And I actually wonder if that takes some away from the first line, and maybe Ottawa's in a position where they can roll like a line 1A, line 1B situation. Don't laugh at this comparison, but I was thinking it's almost like when the Leafs had Austin Matthews centering one line and John Tavares centering another. I'm not saying these lines are up to that capacity, but they might be level to the point that both lines are played like an equal amount and that there's no really true number one line to get all the deployment, which is what I said at the start about DeBrincat. That would be his number one obstacle to being that 40-goal guy again.
Yeah, so in the end, like, people in the chat are also giving suggestions of reasons why this might be better for DeBrincat. It's really pretty tricky to try to predict. So I think for me, I'm going to play it safe. I'm probably going to draft him as a similar type of player as last year. Hope the good outweighs the bad of, like, maybe getting a little bit fewer minutes, maybe having not Patrick Kane, but also playing with an overall better team that will maybe, especially now that Chicago is totally tearing everything apart. It's going to be really tough. We're definitely going to talk about the Chicago implications in just a second because Kane and Taves like now have nobody to play with. Brian, here, a question for you, and then I'll pass the mic back. By the way, people listening, if you think this sounds normal, this is really tricky. Okay, we're passing the mic back and forth. I'm really impressed with us so far. Okay, so Brian, in the cupful, keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patriot Fantasy League, our scoring pretty well by now. A little bit more for goals. We give a decent amount for shots. You get bonus for hits. It's points league. I want you to rank, just off the top of your head, like, you don't have to stick with this, the 5 Ottawa guys. Like, I just want to rank up the fantasy value because, like, how do you decide who to draft? I think Brady Tkachuk seems like the safe, like, top pick in a multi-cat league like this because he's going to give you so many shots and hits and points only. I have no idea. I could see all 5 of these guys potentially leading the team in points, and I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, what's your off the top of your head? Tkachuk, DeBrincat, Norris, Batherson, Stützle. You're in a fantasy draft. You want to get a couple Sens. What is the ranking there? Or is it just like all very close?
I think you almost just nailed it with the way you went down that list, if you don't remember. So I think Tkachuk does stand over and above just because, like, we know he's there. He knows the team. He's comfortable. Like, DeBrincat is going to have that sort of flag you have next to a player who's switching teams, switching situations. This is the first time we've seen him move in the NHL. He's been in a pretty static situation with Chicago for a while. So yeah, it might take him some time to figure out his role in the team. So there is that little flag next to him. And that's why I would still have Tkachuk higher, even though I think there's equally a threat for 40 or more goals. And then after Tkachuk, I think it's a really level playing field. Like, I could give you an argument. I think I'd go DeBrincat or Josh Norris as second. And I think I might lean Norris just because of not knowing what DeBrincat, how long it'll take for DeBrincat to find his feet. When I assume DeBrincat is going to factor in on the top power play, but he's going to have to displace someone. Maybe it's Batherson, maybe it's Stützle. We don't know yet. So these are the questions I have about Alex DeBrincat, and that's why maybe he'd be the third guy that I draft on Ottawa. But I think I'd go Tkachuk, Norris, then DeBrincat, and then, yeah, Stützle's like a wild card because I think his upside is above and beyond maybe any Ottawa Senator, actually. Like, if anybody could, like, surprise us with a 90 or 100-point season, I don't know if it's this season, but it's going to be Tim Stützle one day, and we just don't know when that day is going to come. So he's really exciting. Then Jake Batherson, I think, is going to be like a super steady, dependable guy whose upside, like, it's really hard. These are all really interesting players, and we don't, as we were talking about on a recent show, we don't know what any of their upsides are. Like, from our surprise party episode, we talked about how they all took a huge step forward last year. It looks sustainable, and we don't yet know if they have room for another step forward.
Yeah, it's really tricky for sure. I like because don't forget Drake Batherson was like point per game last season, and he was doing even better before he came back from his injury. And then I guess if you look at his last 15 games, he only had 10 points. But before that, he was above point per game. And, sometimes when a player comes back from injury, maybe it's just like, oh, you don't know if that's like the true like best that they could provide. Then you have Stützle's like the opposite, right? He was kind of slow to start the year. He finished off 21 points in his final 18 games. So Stützle was already showing us his high upside. So I don't know, maybe my ranking, that's the thing. I think that I'll just throw one out there, which I think I'm going to have Norris last, even though you had him second. And that's no disrespect, but someone's got to go last. I think I would go Tkachuk, DeBrincat, Batherson, Stützle, Norris, and that's just what I'm gonna do.
I guess I'm just like, why Norris last? Like he was a 35 goal scorer.
Yeah, but Stützle has the upside, I think, to be point per game or higher, and Batherson also don't forget in our league we're counting hits, and he like provides more peripherals. And I don't know, like Batherson, like they're all good. So I don't think we have to even talk more about this. Let's move on then to another team. Let's go to Chicago next, okay? Because they're still, Jonathan Toews we could kind of forget about at this point. Like he was already pretty useless in fantasy. I guess one good thing for him with DeBrincat and Kirby Dach out of the picture is you'd imagine he gets back on the top power play because he was kicked off the top power play. Like who else is going to be on this top power play? He's probably also the top line. Like as of now, if Toews and Kane stay, who's the center of the top line? I think it has to be Jonathan Toews. Who else could it be?
Well, there's Dylan Strome.
Well,
he hasn't yet been traded, but it's rumored.
Well, he's a UFA also. So he's an RFA, but I think the word is that they're not planning on signing him. And they said that he's like, I think that Strome is not going to get traded. I think he's going to be just like not qualified and he's going to be a UFA. So Chicago's just like, we don't want you. Then there's Jonathan Toews. Who's next? Henrik Borgstrom, who used to be a prospect for Florida at some point, I think. So yeah, we don't need to get into Jonathan Toews. Like maybe there's an argument to be made that if like things stay the way they are, then maybe he is someone you take in the last round or something, just because he's going to get good deployment again. We'll see if he's up to the task. Maybe he needed more time to recover from whatever kept him, the whole concussion and everything. But Patrick Kane's the interesting one, right? Because if everyone's gone and Patrick Kane has no one to play with, assuming he stays on the team, I guess we don't need to dive too deep because he might get traded or something if he waives his no trade clause. But like, is he still like a potential like 90-point guy, or is it just like going to be impossible no matter how good he is? Like how can you get so many points if you have nobody to play with? Like who is it? Kubalik? Isn't Kubalik also a free agent? Like who is the second best player on this team after Patrick Kane?
Kubalik is an RFA, so he may or may not. I mean, the Chicago needs to retain someone, right? They need to fill out a lineup. They're clearly going to tank. Like they have a new GM, they have a new coach. They are ready to burn it all down and start fresh. And we'll see if Toews and Kane are around through the year to start the year. But Toews concerns me no matter what. Like, even if he had line mates, I would still be worried. He looked awful last season. Terrible. And we talked about him on our surprise party episodes, which, by the way, if you haven't heard, I think they came out really well. I think we did a great job naming the surprises. So I have no faith in Jonathan Toews bouncing back at this point. There were no signs of life of like the former Jonathan Toews we know. So to think that he could suddenly be super fancy relevant, like yeah, maybe worth a last round flyer, but I actually would probably prefer someone a little more interesting or exciting, and I'd put him on my watch list to start the season. But Toews is not someone I'm interested in, just because last year it wasn't just bad luck. It wasn't even bad luck. He never came close to hitting the levels of like under the hood, like a shot generation, even the time he spent on the ice. None of it looked good. So that's why I am not ready to take a chance on Jonathan Toews. On top of the fact that, yeah, there's nobody left to play with unless he gets to play with Patrick Kane. That's good. But even that, I don't think can really make him an automatic fantasy relevant player.
I'm like leaning in here just to be like, forget about Jonathan Toews. Okay, I want to hear about Patrick Kane. Like, where do I draft this guy? Is he first round or like third round now? Also, I guess the same for Seth Jones. He's like random. Like, what a weird decision. Obviously, they weren't aligned last season and this season. It's unfortunate that they gave away all these futures for Seth Jones just to go into full tank mode. But now they have this guy locked in for 8 years at $1 million. $1 billion a year. I guess what is it actually, like 9 million? I think. So like just like unfathomable amount. Like already probably an untradeable contract. And it's like, are we going to expect, like, yeah, so basically Patrick Kane and Seth Jones are people that generally would be drafted really high in fantasy. Are you fading these guys, Brian? Or maybe are they going to be good value? They're going to fall too far and people are going to give up on them and actually they're still going to be able to provide real value? Like, it's so hard to imagine like a player with a team with like only like 1 or 2 star players can they still be good? Like, do we have an example of this ever happening before?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Okay. While you talk about those two guys, I'm going to try to think of an example.
Okay, I feel like there might be. Wonder about Alish Hemsky on those Oilers teams post Cup run might qualify, but I'm not exactly sure if.
Yeah, and he wasn't like a first round fantasy talent even at his best at that point.
Yeah, and so looking at our patron rankings so far, which we're doing by the way over on our Discord server with patrons, it's a lot of fun to watch. Gabriel Landeskog just went off the board at 36th overall, which
by the way, I did not vote for him. So the patrons disagreed with me. I thought that it was pretty obvious to go with Philip Forsberg at this point. We got the news that Philip Forsberg signed his contract, so he's going to be in the same situation. The main reason I was a little worried about him is, you go to a new team, maybe you won't get the same role, but now he's going to be back as like the clear straw that stirs the drink over in Nashville. So why, even if he doesn't keep up like whatever the 90-point pace he just went on, I still feel like Forsberg's going to be a solid 75, 80-point guy, which I like better, I think, than Landeskog, who has that injury risk. So I don't know. But whatever, we're not talking about that. I'm just getting distracted here. So Brian, what are we talking about? Kane and Seth Jones.
Yeah, well, I will just chime in and say that Landeskog, you're looking for like Forsberg, yeah, a solid 75, 80-point guy if he gets the deployment. I think it's great he's staying. We know what we're getting there. But Gabriel Landeskog is generally like an 80 to 90-point player, I would say. So I'd rather that than Philip Forsberg. Fair. And he hits. Okay, but you wanted to know about Patrick Kane. Oh, right. I was bringing up the patron rankings because Patrick Kane went 17th in our patron rankings, dropping 7 spots from last year. So last year, Patrick Kane was a first rounder to our patrons and in a lot of our Cupful leagues, our Keeping Carlton Ultimate Patron Fantasy League drafts. He was also a first rounder, just borderline first round player. Here he went behind Igor Shesterkin, Roman Josi, Kyle Connor, David Pastrnak. That all makes sense. But he went ahead of Brady Tkachuk, Artemi Panarin, Matthew Tkachuk, Jake Gensel, Sidney Crosby. And honestly, I'm naming all these guys now thinking, yeah, maybe I would prefer them to Patrick Kane in a disgruntled, unknown situation. Like Patrick Kane hasn't changed teams, but the team has changed on him. So that's a flag for me. I think Patrick Kane is still good enough to do it all himself. We've seen him do that. I don't think it's unlikely he can do it again. In fact, I think he could be a really great value second round pick because I don't think a lot of people are going to be excited about him going into the year. So I think if you can get him, towards the middle of the second round, that's fair value. Late second round or even early third round, that'd be great. A third round Patrick Kane, which I think is possible for the first time in forever. So you might find some value there, but you are taking a bit of a risk because that team is going to be junk. And you mentioned Seth Jones too. Look who's left to be on the power play in Chicago. You have Patrick Kane and Seth Jones. I had to look through that pause was me looking through the rest of the depth chart.
I guess they have Lucas Reichel, someone who they drafted in the first a couple years ago that maybe will have, if he can't make the team now, it's what is wrong with you? Unless the team just decides they want to let him develop a little longer. But this is a great opportunity for him to come right in and become an impact guy, maybe an early Calder candidate, if he can pull a Lucas Raymond, another Lucas, and do really well on it. But Lucas Raymond got to play with 2 good players on the top line. Reichel, if he gets to play with Patrick Kane, okay, he's a name I'm going to throw out there just that came to my mind. Oh, actually, also Shams brought him up in the chat here. So I think the more I think about it, maybe he's someone to watch.
Sure, watch Reichel, watch Dominic Kubalik, even though we know we can't expect much consistency from him based on past performances if he is qualified and stays in Chicago. But if I'm an opposition team, I'm keying in on Jones, I'm keying in on Kane, letting everyone else shoot if they want to, and that could hit into Patrick Kane's usual power play numbers. But again, he's still really good. I don't want to take away from him. He is someone who could do a whole lot by himself. So don't fade him completely, but yeah, sure, fade him a little.
All right, yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to come up with my example of a team that only had one really good forward. Going into last year, I guess Minnesota, we were kind of thinking maybe just Kaprizov and Fiala were the only 2 good forwards, and there were some people that really impressed us. I guess Joel Eriksson Ek we knew was decent, so maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's the same situation. It's going to be tricky. Okay, what should we do next year? Oh, Brian, one last thing.
Alish Hemsky was a point per game forward on the 2007-2008 Edmonton Oilers. The next highest scorer was Sean Horkoff. He was a point per game, but only played 53 games. After him, Sam Gagner with 49 points in 79 games. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Is Sam Gagner still in the league? Isn't he still on Detroit? Yeah, look at this guy. Just going and going. Good for him. Where should we go next here? I guess let's just end the loop here. Let's go to Montreal now, who gets Kirby Dach. So Brian, bring up your Kirby Dach research, and we'll see if there's any value there. So the Habs obviously made the big splash. First of all, they didn't draft Shane Wright in the draft. And again, I'll get into this with scouting more to talk about the draft. They grab Slavkovsky with the number 1 overall pick, which is maybe surprising to some. Maybe more surprising was Shane Wright falling all the way to 4th. But again, that'll be a discussion for another time. Then the Habs had the opportunity to pick. Well, the thing is, they traded. Okay, I got this, Brian. Okay, they have that defenseman who I'm blanking on his name. What was that guy? Well, Romanov. So they traded Romanov to the Islanders, got the 13th pick, flipped that pick over to Chicago, and there's other picks involved to get Kirby Dach. So basically, they get rid of a defenseman. Montreal's not exactly a team that has so many defensemen. I'm not saying Romanov was the for sure answer. He seemed like a good, solid young player, 22 years old, good defensively. He's gone, but Montreal also really had a problem with center, right? Who do they have? They have obviously Nick Suzuki, and then they lost Kotkaniemi. They lost Deneau last season, and that really was one of the main reasons why they got the first pick in this draft, right? Because they didn't have any centers left aside from Suzuki. They have Christian Dvorak, but yeah, clearly they needed a good middle six center. The question is Kirby Dach that center that they need, or is he, because he has been very underwhelming in Chicago, but maybe people were expecting too much from him as a 3rd overall pick. Now he goes to Montreal as basically a 13th overall pick, right? That's what they gave up for him. I guess we can even tell you the name of the person. Frank Nazar, who I did hear a lot of people saying they were excited about him. Some people are saying that maybe he's overrated. Again, that's another conversation for scouting, but basically we could put it this way to say the Habs traded Romanov for Nazar and then traded Nazar for Kirby Dach. In the end, are we excited about Kirby Dach now? Is he someone you draft in fantasy next year, or is he just going to be a blah, middle six, Kotkaniemi type in his last year in Montreal, where maybe there's a run now and then, but generally not someone you depend on in fantasy?
I think closer to the latter than the former for a couple reasons. I could see it breaking both ways. I am going to say that. I would say the reason that I wouldn't count on it to break his way is that I just don't know who he's going to play with in Montreal. If he's centering a line, I guess, it's not a terrible assortment of wingers available past the first line, which is Suzuki, Caulfield, for sure. And then we actually don't know the third piece. Maybe it's Josh Anderson, but then there's Mike Hoffman.
Maybe it's Slavkovsky, right? 1st overall pick.
Could be if he makes the jump right away. Jonathan Drouin, Evgeny Dadonov, Brendan Gallagher. There's a handful of names who it's yeah, maybe that could kind of work for Kirby Dach if they find the right chemistry. I still wouldn't count on it, though, because that Montreal team is pretty weak. There's a lot of work to do. They're still not strong on the back end. And, as great as Marty St. Louis appeared to be when he came in as coach, and they sort of righted the ship, or at least kept it from being kept the team from being in the nosedive they were in coming into his hiring. I'm still not having a lot of faith in the team, which means that it's a lot to ask for a player who's going to start the season 21 years old. He'll turn 22 years old in January, new to the team, probably has had a rough couple years, saw his deployment cut last season, talking about Kirby Dach now, and it's been a rough time. And I'm not sure I expect Kirby Dach to be able to come onto a team that is kind of broken and a mishmash of miscast pieces and be fantasy relevant. If you want to look for some sunlight, Kirby Dach's IPP last year was low. His points participation was below 50% when we could expect it to be closer to 70%. And he also lost a lot of his power play deployment, which you could see as if he gets it back, he's in good shape. Or you could say, well, he lost his power play deployment, and that's a reason to think, this guy can't hold on to valuable minutes, even when they're handed to him. He has not taken the step forward that we've hoped for since his rookie season. Could he do it in Montreal this year? Yes. But I'm not counting on it. I don't think he's someone I'm going to draft. I'm trying to decide, Elon, if I have a choice between Kirby Dach or Jonathan Toews. Let's say both play the first 2 nights of the season. I can get an extra game from one of them, or from both of them. They're both a schedule ad. They make sense as streamers. Who would I prefer? Because I don't really want to draft them. I don't know. I think I might go. If Toews is playing with Kane, I'll go Toews. Otherwise, I'll go Dach.
Yeah, like even if Taves has lost a million steps, if he's going to get the deployment I expect him to, assuming again, because again, you were bringing up Kubalik, Brian. Like Shams is reminding us in the chat here that Kubalik is likely not going to be tendered. Like they don't want to keep anybody. Okay.
No one's tendered.
Yeah, so I don't know who, but like assuming Kane and Taves are there, I'll take Taves over Kirby Doc. But you never know. Like maybe the upside for Kirby Doc could be like Deneau in his last season with Montreal, where he had a season with 47 points in 71 games back in 2019-20. That's like to me the upside if he's like, but like Deneau is like really good. So I'm saying that's the upside.
Yeah.
And that's not even like that amazing though. Like it's still only a 54-point pace, and I think that's the best we can expect from a Kirby Doc next year.
And to expect Doc to do what Deneau did that season. Deneau was basically playing on a top line with amazing wingers, generating a ton of scoring chances, and playing extremely responsibly and effectively, like two-way as a defensive line as well as offensive. So that's that to me that I think that's a fair upside to expect for Doc. But he's gonna have a very different path to 47 points if he gets there the way like Deneau did. It's hard. I'm pretty down on Doc.
Yeah, well, the Habs, I guess, needed a center, so we'll see. They do not have any D now. Like you had the Habs depth chart up, Brian. I saw we have Jeff Petrie, who again, I think I said on a recent episode, I feel like he's a pretty good sneaky pick. Like obviously, don't reach for him, but like if he falls decently in your draft, like especially if you're in a multi-cat league, you've got a guy who really turned his season around in the second half. So you don't even look at the full numbers, just look at the post Martin St. Louis numbers. And you're looking like a 50-point defenseman. Well, I'm not saying he will be that, but even if he's only a 40-point defenseman with like a decent number of blocks and hits and shots, like so. But because after him, who's there? They did extend Chris Weidman, who might take the top power play, and then there's really just nobody. I'm seeing here Joel Edmondson, David Savard. Is he still under contract? Okay, yeah. Oh yeah, they extended him. Okay. That's that situation. Let's go to a new team. Okay, let's talk about another defenseman actually, who is in a new situation and is going to be pretty interesting. Actually, let's just get a quick time check here. Brian is again. We've got our families downstairs. Okay, wait. It looks like we got a 20-minute warning here. So we're gonna get Brian. This is the plan I'm thinking. Okay, we're gonna talk about Tony DeAngelo going to Philly, and then we're gonna do a huge goalie rundown. So if anyone in the chat here has another idea of something we should talk about, let us know now because that's the current plan. So let's go to Philadelphia, where Tony DeAngelo, for some reason, Carolina decided not to continue with him. I wonder if that's I want to do so much speculation, but I know we'll do another show soon when things actually happen. But like Carolina really doesn't have someone to run the top power play now that DeAngelo is gone, which makes me think, and again, let me know if I'm getting too far ahead of myself, but like John Klingberg is out there in free agency and is someone who, say what you will about him in terms of his overall impact on the team, he can run a power play, right? So I feel like that's such a good fit. So I almost want to just jump ahead and now ask you about TDA versus Klingberg. But let me set the stage first, and maybe I won't even get into that because we can wait for Klingberg to actually go to Carolina. And obviously a lot has to happen, but okay, Tony DeAngelo, huge season last year. He was signed for just $1 million because of all the off ice issues, and also he was like obviously kicked off the Rangers, and they were also, I think, unhappy with him for some of the on ice issues. Anyways, no one was expecting him to have the season he did, right? I think it was like around a 60-point pace. I don't have it open right now. Maybe you could bring that up for me. So now he is sent over to the Philadelphia Flyers, where Philly, as we've covered in our beat writer interview with Charlie O'Connor, like they really don't have someone. They brought in Ryan Ellis, who I guess could have been a guy who would have had a chance to run the top power play and get significant minutes. Charlie O'Connor in that interview basically said, watch what Philly does in the offseason. If they like go after like a top pairing or like, top power play type defenseman, maybe that's a bad sign for Ryan Ellis. So I don't know what this means in terms of if Ellis is like on track or not with his injury. But yeah, like Provorov has shown that he's not someone you could rely on to run that top power play. There's really no one there. Like Yandel, I doubt is going to be back with the team. I think he's probably out of the league at this point. So I think that on one hand, maybe it's like a Chicago situation though. Like on one hand, I think it's a pretty much guarantee that DeAngelo starts the season running the top power play. I wonder if he'll be able to approach his numbers from last year because Philly is not Carolina, right? Especially with Giroux gone. And now that we have word that Konechny is like injured, might not start the year. Like, I just wonder, and Philly was already such a train wreck of a team. They will have Couturier back, hopefully. Do you think DeAngelo has a chance to match his like 60-ish point pace from last season? Or do you think he's someone who takes a huge hit now that he's gone to Philly? It's 2 years, $5 million. I have him in my dynasty league. Is he someone I should be excited about or trying to trade before anyone listens to this episode?
I think you're going to want to try and trade him. I think one thing that Tony DeAngelo was able to do in Carolina because of the makeup of their blue line was that... Are we good? Is there a problem?
Just kind of fucked up a little bit.
Okay, hang on. Just wait. Pause.
Okay, I don't know. Go.
Should I just keep going?
Yeah, I think our audio is going to be fucked up in this episode.
Oh no! Why? What happened?
The gain went up at some point for no reason.
Oh.
So maybe there's a part with higher gain. Anyways, nothing we could do. Let's keep going. It's still recorded. It's just gonna sound weird.
Yeah, crackly.
I don't know.
Okay. So you said, can he do in Carolina, in Philly, what he's going to do in Carolina? Okay. Well, one thing Tony DeAngelo was able to do in Carolina was pile up points because the makeup of that blue line and whole team in Carolina was very, very supportive defensively. And I don't think Philadelphia can quite offer him that same sort of working environment. Like right now, we could assume he's slotted in on the top pairing with Provorov, who's rumored to be on the block too. Who knows? But like that would be a good pairing. I think that might be the only actual pairing in which DeAngelo can have something similar, at least at 5-on-5, to what he had in Carolina, which was a partner who could be really defensively responsible and let him sort of ply his trade and do his thing in the offensive zone. Although the forward group isn't there necessarily for DeAngelo to do that at 5-on-5. And the forward group also isn't there to do that on the power play either. Look at this Flyers power play, right? You've got Couturier, if DeAngelo's running it. So DeAngelo, Couturier, Atkinson, and then I guess some combination of Konechny, Hayes, Van Riemsdyk, maybe Farabee, maybe Morgan Frost, maybe Owen Tippett. Like there's a lot of bubble guys, and it's not a good sign for a really effective power play. Like that Carolina power play knew how to go to work, and that's what helped Tony DeAngelo pick up 20 power play points in 64 games, which beat his output from his breakout season with the Rangers, where he had 19 power play points over 68 games. So I'm concerned that DeAngelo is going to be a little more exposed in Philadelphia than he was in Carolina, and that's going to keep him from being able to be the offensive defenseman that he's best off being because the support just isn't there, and that power play is going to be weaker. So, Elon, you're asking in a dynasty league at $5 million a year, do I want to keep Tony DeAngelo? Not especially. Like I could see him taking a hit down to 50 or 55 points, and maybe this is underestimating him. I know I underestimated him in his breakout season, and I don't want to make the same mistake twice, but I am pretty concerned about what he'll be able to accomplish on a Philly team that honestly looks broken and looks lost. I listened to your Charlie O'Connor Beats episode, and he's like, they haven't totally committed to a rebuild. They're sort of just playing this middle ground, and I don't think that's going to get them very far based on the roster they have. So we'll see what the rest of the offseason looks like to find out if they're rebuilding or not. But I actually think either way, this is a hit to Tony DeAngelo's value, and I wouldn't be as interested in him as I would be had he stayed in Carolina.
Yeah, at least for the dynasty players like myself, like it's only 2 years. So if he turns out to be a bust, it's not like you're stuck with him for a really long time. But yeah, he actually had a 65-point pace last year, right? Like 51 points in 64 games. Just to see, Brian, on Carolina, I wonder if you could bring this up quickly. Who was running that top power play for those games that DeAngelo was injured? I feel like, was it like Brett Pesce or Slavin?
I think it was Jacob Slavin.
All right, so he's someone to maybe look at. I know that we've talked about him on the show before, and like hasn't been especially effective, but it's still a really good spot to be in, right? So if it turns out that they don't get Klingberg, because obviously Shams brought up the point that if they get Klingberg, they're going to have to pay for him, and who knows? In terms of their cap space, I'm seeing on Cap Friendly they have around 19 million, but they have a lot of guys to sign, right? Nachas is an RFA. I guess maybe they'll have to decide what they do with Nino or Vincent Trocheck if they could bring any of them back. So we'll have to see how everything shakes out, obviously in Carolina. But we'll wait until UFA happens, and then maybe look at the Carolina side more in terms of the fantasy impact, because we just have to kind of see what they're planning to do. So with that, Brian, how about we jump into some goaltending now? Because like there's been a huge, like there's a whole bunch. I'm just going to run down actually all the goaltending changes that have happened around the league so far, and then maybe we can just pick and choose which ones we think are the most interesting. So in terms of like players getting extended, like Marc-Andre Fleury is extended on Minnesota for a couple of years. There was a really funny quote from Bill Guerin, right? They were asking, apparently like Cam Talbot, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, or Chad, okay? Apparently, my understanding is Cam Talbot is upset about the situation because I guess he doesn't want to be in a tandem. He liked being a starter, or something like maybe he wants to get a contract extension himself now to prove that they like him. Anyways, and then like journalist or something was asking him like, what are you going to do about this situation? And are you concerned about Cam Talbot? And Bill Guerin was just kind of like, I don't really care like what he says. Like he's under contract. I'll just do what I want. I'm trying to build a team that wins. And you think why not? Like if you have have now Fleury and Talbot. You have a really solid goalie tandem, and you don't have to worry about goaltending. If someone gets injured, you have someone you could rely on. So that's the Minnesota situation. I think that in terms of fantasy, I think I saw a quote from Marc-Andre Fleury literally saying, I expect to be a 50-50 tandem. So it's like terrible for fantasy, right? I guess if you're in a categories league and you're just caring about rates, they might actually play better since neither of them will get too tired. But in terms of a league where you depend on volume, I wouldn't be that interested in either of them until someone gets injured, of course. Not saying that'll happen. Okay, so what else do we have here? Scott Wedgwood is going to be the backup of Ottinger on the Stars, which I think just shows us that Ottinger is going to be a really high volume starter. So I don't know, Craig Anderson signed by Buffalo. I think we talked about him on a show and said like it probably they'll get someone else, or maybe they'll depend on Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Then some bigger names. So Vanacek goes to New Jersey from Washington. So now New Jersey's going to start the year probably with a tandem of Mackenzie Blackwood and Vanacek. And we'll see if Blackwood can bounce back, not having all the pressure of like needing to be the only guy. There's obviously also Nico Dawes waiting in the wings. Ville Husso got traded to Detroit and then signed there. So I guess now we've got Nedeljkovic and Husso, as I'd imagine, a pretty even tandem to start. And then someone like, I don't know, maybe really quickly, Brian, do you see a obvious front runner there, Husso and Nedeljkovic? Like, I mean, Husso just got big money, but at the same time, like, if you were to just asking me, like, which goalie do I think is better? I feel like it's like a total coin flip. Like, we've barely seen either of them for more than like a season or two. So I don't know in Detroit, but it's a good situation for Detroit, right? They have two goalies. Did you want to jump in there, or should I just keep going?
I can jump in. Well, you asked about Husso and Nedeljkovic, and I think that's a pretty good thought to just assume it's 50-50. I think Detroit would love for one of them to take the reins and show their starter. Like Detroit is paying them like an affordable enough contract where they can like afford to put one of them on the bench. I mean, ideally, you're not sitting Husso at just under $5 million a year for 3 years, but it's not an outrageous commitment to have made to a goalie that you can't say like it's not like a Bobrovsky where it makes it so hard to say, oh, like we made a mistake, we have to bench $10 million. No, you can bench Ville Husso with his contract. But that said, I think it is going to be even starting out of the gate. I think Husso might have the upper hand because they have committed to him for 3 years, but Nedeljkovic, I think, still has one legit chance to prove that he can be the goalie that this team wants to move forward with. They're both similar ages. And so we're hopeful. I mean, as fantasy managers, we want both of these guys or one of them to falter, right? So we can actually pick one. If not, I actually think that they might be a sneaky tandem to own. If tandems are worth having in your league, if this Detroit team is improved, then Husso and Nedeljkovic could be a handy little tandem if they support each other well.
Yeah, potentially. I don't know. I just feel like Nedeljkovic takes a huge hit in fantasy to me just because, like, I think it's obvious, right? Like, there was a chance he was going to be, like, the starter in Detroit for years to come, and now, like, clearly, like, that's not going to be the case. Like, they didn't just sign Husso for $4.75 million a year to be a backup, so probably at best for Nedeljkovic, we're looking at, like, a tandem situation. So that's a shame, but it looks like that's again, like in fantasy right now, a volume starting goalie is so much more valuable because as we go through the teams, there's gonna be like when we do our Smart Goalies Board episode, I feel like it's gonna be like half the teams are tandems at this point. Like we just talked about Minnesota, same exact situation. So that's why again, like a Jake Ottinger on Dallas, all of a sudden to me is like so interesting because it's like those types of volume starters are going to be few and far between. Like the ones that you can really depend on to hold the job as a starter. You know, look at a Bobrovsky. Is he like he's like a starter probably, and Spencer Knight is probably still the backup, but it's like there's that good chance, you know, like an Ottinger situation or like Thatcher Demko, you know, it's like a goalie that, and obviously Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, like you just know 100% they're going to play a ton of games. So anyways, those are those teams. What else we have? Oh, back to Chicago. They acquired Petr Mrazek. And apparently Davidson was asked, like, what, do you see something in him? And he was like, he's a goalie. Like that was sort of what they wanted to do. So yeah, they didn't have any goalies under contract. Like I think Lankinen and Delia are both UFAs. We'll see if they end up signing one of them to be the backup to Mrazek. Does that mean Mrazek is the starter? Like, I don't know. This Chicago team is going to be brutal because I don't know about you, Brian. I don't have any faith in Petr Mrazek. Like he stunk last year in Toronto. He's like injury prone. He's like kind of like a Matt Murray to me. So it's like, I don't even know actually who I'd have more faith in. Maybe just Chicago should just take Matt Murray from the Sens, take the contract, give the Sens a pick or take a pick. Yeah. I don't know. Like, do you think, Brian, that who would you rather have between Mrazek and Matt Murray? Is that a fair comparison? I just feel like either way, I'm not interested in Mrazek in fantasy. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather have Matt Murray because there's a chance he stays healthy and there's a chance he plays well. With Mrazek, it feels like the chances both that he plays well and that he stays healthy are are both like the chances of either of those things happening are lower for Mrazek than Matt Murray, especially given the Chicago team that he is having to backstop. I think he definitely fits Chicago's current MO, which is tank and see if they can get a good draft spot for what's looking to be a pretty stacked 2023 entry draft with, of course, Connor Bedard being the headliner. I think it's pretty clear what Chicago's trying to do. Mrazek lets them pay some salary, make sure they're hitting the cap floor, and also still probably lose a bunch of games. So I'd be as interested in Mrazek this year as I would have ever been in Lankinen last year, which is not very much.
Yeah, definitely reasonable. So don't go out draft Mrazek. Maybe he'll be a streamer at some point, depending on who the Chicago Blackhawks are playing. Toronto, by the way, we'll definitely have to talk about them at some point. They currently don't have a goalie, right? Like they have Shalgren, but they're still Campbell is a UFA. Also, Darcy Kemper is a UFA. So those are the two big name goalies left that are going to land somewhere. Also, let's end in Colorado here, where they traded for Georgiev from the Rangers. And they also announced that Darcy Kemper is not going to be signed. So we know that. Oh, Shams is saying that Matt Murray might go to Toronto and talks are intensifying. That's the latest rumor. So maybe that. So what? But you can't just go Murray and Shalgren with this team and hope that that's your chance to win the cup. Oh my God. If I was a Leafs, I don't know. What are they going to do? We'll talk about them when I guess things actually happen. I want to end in Colorado, okay? Our reigning Stanley Cup champions are letting their goalie that backstopped them to the championship walk. Of course, it's not as if he was lights out. He was obviously good enough, and I don't know, no shade against Darcy Kemper, but I imagine they feel like we're a strong enough team that we can still do well with a goalie who's another roll of the dice a little bit. And that, so yeah, they have Georgiev. They also still have Pavel Francouz, who I believe is still under contract. Yeah, he's still under contract for another couple of years. So they've got Francouz at $2 million. Now they get Georgiev from the Rangers, who's been a backup the whole time. First for Lundqvist for a bit, then obviously for Shesterkin. Last year was Georgiev's worst season in terms of save percentage. He fell below 900. Before that, he'd always been above 900. He seems like someone, though, who I am interested in fantasy. And I'll tell you why. Just because Colorado's such a good team that we've seen maybe them be able to be good enough that they could still win games even with not the most amazing goalie. And then as far as Georgiev goes, the Rangers have been known to be such a poor defensive team. Maybe all of a sudden, Georgiev being on this better team, maybe he has something to show that we haven't been able to see yet just because of the situation he's been in. Also, he's never been able to get in a role. And you might think I think a lot of people would assume Pavel Francouz is the front runner. I just think that Colorado already showed that they didn't really want to depend on Francouz, right? Kemper struggled in a few games in the playoffs, and they still went back to him. He had that eye injury, and even still, Kemper was someone who the Avs went to and didn't want to go to Francouz. So that just makes me wonder if maybe it'll be a similar situation where they like Francouz as the backup, and they'll be willing to give Georgiev a chance to be the starter. So obviously we'll learn a lot in training camp. Brian walked away right now, so I can't throw to him with a question, but I think definitely that's probably another tandem. Again, when we're talking again about all these teams with tandems, I think Colorado going into the year, you have to imagine there is one. But I would say I wouldn't sleep on Georgiev as someone having if you're in a keeper league or dynasty league where you're keeping everybody. Georgiev might be someone I'd try to pry off of someone or grab out of free agency if he's out there, just because I think there's a chance he could be not huge volume, but a goalie who plays a lot on obviously the best team in the league. So I think that is all the content that we were going to cover for today. I don't know when Brian's coming back, so I think I'm just going to wrap this baby up. Thanks to everyone who joined us in the chat here. A total last-minute impromptu episode. I just figured Brian's here. The kid was doing a puzzle. So I thought maybe that's a good opportunity to just come up and record something quickly. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought. I think there might have been a microphone issue midway through, so I'll see when I edit if things got wonky for a moment or two. And if so, I apologize. We'll be back to our regular scheduled programming and quality by the next episode. Okay, so the plan is I've got Scouching coming on Monday. And then we'll, before we know it, there's going to be UFA, and we're going to have to do lots of shows breaking all of that down, and we'll try to get some more beat writer interviews. I sent some emails over the weekend and didn't get responses. I guess maybe a lot of these beat writers were busy focusing on the draft. I hope I didn't blow my chance by emailing someone when they're busy and now being oh, this person's too annoying. I would forget about them. So I'll do my best to get us more beat writer interviews for myself and Ben to do. Thanks again. Yeah. So what should I say here? Oh, thanks to the patrons for all your support over the summer. We're having so much fun over on Discord. Really appreciate your support. If anyone else wants to jump in, keepingkarlsson.com/patron. And yeah, we're definitely going to have to start talking about the cupful soon. Get that. We've already opened up pre-registration for the patrons, and we need to finalize the rules. And Yeah, just start planning for that. It's going to be the biggest season ever, I think, for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. I'm the reigning champ right now, so I want to make sure the league is pristine so that then I can try to defend under the best possible situation in the best and most challenging league in the world. And I definitely, anyone will be able to join. You can become a patron right now for just $1, get all the patron perks, then also pre-register for the cupful, and you'll be set. Aside from that, please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever. It actually helps. You know what? It's like when you listen to a podcast, you're actually helping us, which is pretty crazy, right? It's free for you. You're not even doing anything. But we have our bosses over at Blue Wire, and their whole thing, if you want to know how it works, is they're like trying to find ads, right? And then they are like counting how many downloads we get so that they can then sell our show to their advertisers. So like just you listening to the show, like thank you. We really appreciate it. And subscribe. You can just auto download every episode. If there's an episode that you don't want to listen to, you still download it. It doesn't hurt. But anyways, okay. With that, Brian is back. So let's cue the outro music. Unless, Brian, did you want to say something about Georgiev or do you want to just end the show? Up to you.
I can give a quick moment on Georgiev, which is that, when I stepped out of the room briefly, you were talking about how the Avs won with Darcy Kemper. Like you could look at the Avs Cup win with Darcy Kemper, meaning two things. One, that Darcy Kemper is good enough to be on a team that wins the Cup. Or two, that Colorado couldn't win the Cup with a goalie, like with whatever average or serviceable goalie. And yes, Darcy Kemper had some really great moments in the regular season. In the playoffs, he had that big injury, but he didn't shine. Like, I don't think he stole many games. I think if he stole 0 games through the playoffs, and he might have stolen 1 or 2 along the way, he was great in the finals against Tampa. I will give him that. Whenever they put on pressure, he was there and like stone cold and kind of in a surprising way to me, actually. It's like, usually like in the round against Edmonton, it felt like Darcy Kemper was giving up more. Distracting for me. Sorry. I lost focus. He was giving up more like stoppable goals. So anyway, all this to say that Alex Georgiev in Colorado, could be more of a thing than Alex Georgiev in New York, because any goalie coming into Colorado could be in good shape. The same way that sort of Minnesota has nurtured their goalies in the past, I think Colorado is capable of doing the same. That said, Georgiev has a pretty reasonable track record in his career. Like he's never had really solid defense in front of him, but he has played basically at or just above his expected save percentage in 3 of his last 4 seasons. There's one, like the 2021 season was catastrophic for Georgiev's numbers, but outside that, he's actually been at least an average NHL goalie, and I assume that's what Colorado sees in him. They're saying, hey, we can handle an average goalie. For what it's worth, Pavel Francouz, same deal, right? This is another guy who's like, he might be an average NHL goaltender. I think both guys right now have proven that they can be NHL backups. Don't know either one has proven that they can be a starter or even a timeshare goalie. And that's what we're going to find out. I think this is another situation where coming into the season, if they had Kemper, it'd be like, there's your starter. But here we are again with 2 goalies who have about an equal chance of taking the reins, and it hurts their fantasy value, and it makes those the lone starters, the workhorses, all the more valuable. So there's my that was a longer take than I expected, but there you go. It's good for Georgiev, I think, and I would say bad for Francouz, at least to start.
Yeah, I think that's about right. We'll find out. It'll be fun. Again, I'm really excited to do our Schmore Goalies board and actually figure out how many starters we have. Because also at some point, we have to say that now some tandem guys do have more value, because now that everyone's a tandem guy, maybe you can't just say, he's a tandem guy, I don't care. Like everyone's going to end up with them. So then it's like maybe having a good tandem guy is actually not so bad. And then we'll have to discuss a strategy of, do you want both of the guys in the tandem? Do you want to take 2 goalies from different teams that are in tandems?
That's the frustrating part, is that I think it's going to be really hard to tell unless there's some really clear training camps and coaches are speaking very clearly about their intentions. Like the Detroit situation, I don't know who's going to come out in front. Like I guess I could find reasons to lean both ways. Colorado, I could find reasons to lean both ways. And I have no faith that the opening night starter is necessarily going to see the greater share of the workload. So there's not even, if you want to go and pick a goalie that's in a tandem, you can't easily pick the one who has the better shot, because there's so many situations that are close to 50-50. It's going to make drafting goalies really tricky, even more so than usual, I think.
Yeah, drafting goalies. And also, though, give you the opportunity to maybe fade goalies if you can't get one of the awesome ones. And then just hope in free agency, there's maybe a tandem where no one wanted either of them because neither of them were playing that much. Then one gets injured and all of a sudden the other one, or maybe like people are just spot starting. You happen to have spot started a goalie and then the other guy gets injured. You just fall into like a good situation. Because I think injuries, as usual in fantasy, are going to have a big impact, maybe more so now. Anyways, Brian, like I said, thanks to everyone. I'm going to right now cue the outro music. So why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dabra Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Tyler, Flash, Andrea, Tom, Derek, David, and Rob. Thank you all so much. Also, shout out to Joel and Andrea for running the patron rankings over on our Discord, keepingkarlsson.com/patron for more of that. Thanks to Shams and Elon for continuing to tweet out all the fantasy relevant news on all our relevant Twitter accounts, which you can find them all over at gamedaytweets.com. Logo art by brandonweeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. And this episode was researched with help from Dabra Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dabra Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge, and Yahoo.
Did we use Yahoo today?
No, but I forgot to say the "and" before NBC Sports Edge, so I had to be grammatically correct.
Okay, so then I ruined you. You almost got it past us. Yeah, I had the draft results here in front of me from Hockey DB. Did you say Hockey DB?
I did, but I should have also said Wikipedia. They have a pretty good entry draft page. It's really easy to track like where trades happened and picks came from.
Yeah, I like that. Like beside the player who got picked, you have a little like footnote of like, then you can see like, oh, this pick came from this team, Montreal to this team. Oh, the microphone looked like it messed up again. I'm just going to end the show. All right. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Brian, what should we do while we wait for more stuff to happen, which is going to happen really soon?
Can't wait for it to happen. Until that time, let's keep doing what we can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Why did it do that? Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, YouTube. I'm gonna.
Ryan's good. Okay, yeah. I'll say goodbye, which we just did. Thanks for joining us. I'm really happy. Hopefully, people had a fun time. Okay. See ya.